Greetings of peace all. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Semina Al-Ghazari, and I am pleased to present another great NICC Parent Support Group panel. With global crises being on the rise, Muslim communities in the United States are becoming more aware of their civic role to alleviate some of the consequences vulnerable populations may bear. Unaccompanied minors during immigration waves and children in challenging situations can be at a critical intersection in their lives when faced by uncertainties of basic needs. Foster care is a tool our society can use to collaborate with the system and be present for Muslim minors in the foster care system. Our panelists today will shed some light on basic information needed for us to be aware of to help fulfill our own community's needs and individual capacity to improve the odds of our brethren in crisis, with resources for those who want to learn more. As you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and our team will monitor the Q&A section in Zoom and on the Facebook live stream. All of the questions will be answered and addressed at the end of the webinar, and we thank you for your cooperation in that. Without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome our panelists to Noor Virtual and present to you first Ms. Maryum Khwaja, who is a licensed clinical social worker in New York. She has worked as a preventative social worker for Child Protective Services in Queens, in addition to working as a foster care supervisor in the Bronx. She has worked with the New Jersey-based organization Smile for Charity as a foster care coordinator to foster relationships with the Child Protective Services in New York and New Jersey. She has organized aid parties and aid gift drives for Muslim children in foster care in order to foster relationships with Muslim foster care children. So the platform is yours, Maryum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Amina, and thank you to the Noor community for having me here. It's a pleasure to speak about this issue that I'm so passionate about. I wanted to just give you kind of like some experiences, and a lot of this is anecdotal because I'm not from Ohio. Some of the challenges and experiences that I have are really a lot of it does impact, or it is involving the New York dynamic, right? And so New York City is a huge city, and so just the vastness of the city and the challenges that presents is also something that comes up. So I had been working 3 years as a preventive social worker, and this is for working to restore and keep families together, right, where there were incidents of potential child abuse, right, or neglect or maltreatment. And so we did for families that were not deemed to have abuse in their homes, or abuse worthy of removal. We preserved them in their homes, and we did counseling with them. It was my first job out of grad school, and I had at any given time 50 to 75% Muslim clients. Okay. In addition to that, then going on later on down the line in my working for Smile for Charity as a foster care coordinator, it was Smile's passion to connect with foster care children, right? And so we were doing meetings. They were based in New Jersey, and they had a foothold in New York as well. And so we wanted to create relationships and create ties. So I was meeting with the Child Protective Agencies of New York and New Jersey, and even some foster care agencies, in order to try to connect with these children, how to bring awareness to them, and how to connect these children with, say, Muslim households or Muslim communities. And the thing that we were finding is that, and this goes for all of the CPS agencies, right, that CPS is the overall the Child Protective Services, that's the overarching organization, right? And they then subcontract other agencies to do the foster care work. And so those agencies each have their own resources that they go to, and they each have their own foster families, but this isn't centralized under the city government or the state governments or anything. And so it becomes challenging to create these relationships, to know where to go to find Muslim clients. And so even in some of these Eid parties that we were trying to host, we hosted a total of 3 of them in New York and 2 in New Jersey, and we did like gift drives and things like that. We weren't able to say get a list of all the Muslim clients from the city or the state to say these are the Muslim clients, we can target them and we can reach out to them and see if they're interested, right? Not us as an organization, because there's confidentiality issues, but they as their caseworkers, right, could not do that because they don't track information in terms of, they don't track their stats based on religious affiliation. They do it on ethnic and cultural lines, but that's that. And so it became very challenging to make these connections and to foster these relationships, right? And so I think what, you guys are in Ohio, it is wonderful. It's a smaller community. You guys do have the opportunity to come together and to really provide services for some of these children that might land up in the system, right? So we might, and the thing that we are in denial about as a community is that we have no idea if the family is in trouble. It's not like people are walking into the mosque and saying, we had a CPS call. We're potentially being investigated for child abuse, right? Nobody talks about this stuff. There's so much shame and secrecy around this that we wouldn't even know if someone in our community is in need of assistance until it's too late, right? So these are some of the challenges that I have seen. In the, a dream, could be one day we could do like the Jewish community here in New York, the Hasidic Jews, they have their own foster care agency. And when you have people from those communities who require foster care services because there's been some identified abuse going on, you can go within your community and get those resources, right? So this is something that I hope and I pray that we one day get to in our communities, right? So there is definitely a shortage of foster parents that are Muslim, right? The wave of there is this need of foster parenting. This question consistently comes up when there is when there is, it seems like there's going to be some overseas children that might be coming in as refugees, and we want to provide these homes for them, right? And which is wonderful. And I pray that some of you all are able to foster or adopt some of these children that need homes. But there are plenty of children that are within our community, right? That have gone through so much hardship and trauma and need safe and loving homes that speak to our faith-based needs, right? And so you all can provide that. Also, the other things that we had learned, one other thing that we learned that stood out to me in my work through the foster care agencies or foster care system was that a majority of Muslim children that are in foster care, a majority of them are adolescents, right? And so there is a breakdown that's happening in terms of children who are becoming more assimilated than their parents, and what that kind of that parental challenge results in, right? And so when there's no acceptance or there's a challenge of these, whether it's the needs or the or beliefs or just decision making, right, then that's where a lot of problems come in, right? So and so then what does that mean again for us as a community, right? Being open to taking in, being prepared that we need to be able to not only educate before any problems happen, educate our community about issues that happen as kids become teenagers, but also in the event, God forbid, there's a child who enters the foster care system, that they would be able to receive that support even as a teenager. And I think I'm going to stop here. I know I probably have a little bit more time, which I would rather share with the other panelists who are more local to the community and can really speak to the work that they're doing directly within the community. But I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up later on. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Maryum. And I'm pleased to present our next speaker, who is Dr. Semina Zahor, and she is a licensed foster parent, family physician, and mother of 3 boys. Among her community involvements, Dr. Zahor volunteers at a free clinic, speaks at community healthcare events, and serves on her masjid's COVID task force. In 2016, she co-founded the Muslim Foster Care Association with Rania Shabib and is currently serving on its board. Welcome, Sameena.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you for inviting me. Can everybody hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind sharing the slides?
1 moment.
So thank you for the introduction, Amina. I am one of the co-founders for the Muslim Foster Care Association. And I just wanted to start with the journey. If you could move to the next slide, Amina, that would be great. So in 2011, my husband and I became licensed foster parents. We actually had attended a seminar at the masjid. Our imam had reached out saying that there were a lot of Muslim children in the foster care system and not enough Muslim families to care for them. And so my husband and I became, felt compelled to become licensed foster parents. And the process took about 6 months. It's a little bit intrusive, but alhamdulillah, we were able to get through it. And literally, as soon as we got our license, we got a call just a few months later about a 5-year-old little Muslim boy, and if we were willing to take him in. And literally after that conversation, 2 hours later, he showed up in my home with just a backpack and the clothes on his back, a small blanket, some toys, and that was it. Literally, he'd been picked up from his school and brought to my home. I have 3 boys of my own, and they're all a little bit older than my foster son. And I thought that I, knew what I needed to know. But what I realized was taking care of a foster child is actually so different than taking care of my own children. And I realized that I couldn't really reach out to my usual family and friends for support. I actually sent out an email to some close friends and my family, just letting them know that I had this child in my home and that I think I needed help. And literally the village that came out was what helped me raise him. And I had friends who would pick him up and take him to the library or take him to the park or take him to the museum, sort of cultural things that he had never been to before, but gave us a break. I had friends that dropped off food, just like you would maybe a new mother who's trying to manage and figure out how to get him enrolled in school. And imagine what it would be like as a child to be taken away from the only home you've ever known and literally dropped off at somebody's family's doorstep in a home that you've never met before. Imagine how that would feel. And that was what my foster son was going through. And the first few nights he cried for hours. He just wanted to go home. He didn't understand why he was in our home. And it was traumatic for my children too, because for the first time they realized that, wow, something like this could happen to them. Could they be taken away from our home? Could something like this happen to them? And they were exposed all of a sudden to a world that was so different from our own. During this time, as I was reaching out, I met Rania, who was a foster parent who herself was taking a new child. And actually, if you want to move to the next slide. And then the next slide. So Rania, this is Rania, and she was a new foster parent. And pretty quickly, we became each other's lifeline. And she would call me, I would call her. It was things that you couldn't really discuss with people who were not foster parents. And we realized very quickly that we needed to create that support system if we were going to get any more families, foster families, Muslim families becoming foster parents. And so in 2016, Rania and I established the Muslim Foster Care Association. And it's an organization that specifically is there to support the Muslim children in foster care and the families that support them, because we very quickly realized that the majority of families that are caring for Muslim children are families of other faiths. Ronnie and I worked with some other community members. We started to, there's already actually, there's a family judge who, knowing that she dealt with a lot of Muslim kids from the foster care system, and she had started this campaign to give Eid gifts to Muslim children, and through her connections, she found out who the Muslim children were, and Ronnie and I became involved in that, and pretty soon as an organization, we took over that responsibility. And what we realized was that there were dozens and dozens of kids in the foster care system, Muslim. And when they received the gifts, this is the first outreach that they had had from the Muslim community, because these were children who were essentially cut off from the Muslim community once they were in homes of other faiths. And we realized very quickly that we had to be there for the support. We did try to, we had presentations like this, trying to get other families to become foster parents, but it is a challenging, responsibility. There are a lot of things that when you're actually fostering, you don't see the benefit of until years and years later. I remember our first foster son, we had him for 3 years. And he eventually was adopted by some friends of ours. And I see him now, 10 years later, and subhanAllah, like to feel that we even had a small, sort of piece in the trajectory that his life taught. I remember when he first came, he didn't even know his English alphabet, let alone in the Arabic alphabet. And we didn't push him. He just, we would pray. And if he wanted to, he would join us. And slowly, just by osmosis, children naturally want to do what their family does. And slowly he started to pray with us. And then one day he asked, I want to learn how to read Quran. And so my mom, subhanAllah, she would come and she would teach him the letters. And of course it was hard. It was a brand new language you're learning, but he was so motivated by the children that he was around, my children, obviously, the kids in the school, that subhanAllah, in a year after he came to our home, he was learning how to read Quran. And within the 3 years, my mom had started reading Quran with him. He was well on his way. And because he was adopted by my friend, we actually kept in touch. And a few years later, he finished Quran. It was such a blessing to feel that we had a small part in that. I recall it's fostering a child that opens up a world of things that you've never been exposed to. And I remember one of his Islamic teachers, she came to me one day and she was like, sister, she said, in all my years of teaching, I've never experienced this. And she said she was talking about the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and how when he was a child, he was orphaned and he was fostered by several different family members. And she said she was giving this lecture, and I think my foster son was about 6 at the time. And she said he suddenly stopped what he was doing and he looked up and he said, like me, like he had such a connection with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu that none of us have ever experienced. And she said, I was just so moved when I heard that, because no other children, really would have that kind of connection with him. And she realized why the sunnah is here, and that would we, if Muhammad sallallahu needed a home, would any of us step up and foster him? Now, obviously the answer in retrospect would be say yes, but you don't know which direction and what the trajectory is, and you can make a huge impact. And I would encourage families, whether you have children, don't have children, it's not an easy job. And by any means, it was not something that I did by myself. And I completely give credit to my village of family and friends. I could not have done it by myself, absolutely not. And so I give complete credit to those around me in helping me with him and the several other children that I fostered after that. And that's one of the things as the organization that we are striving to do, is trying to be that support for the families, because the system is overburdened. As much as there are resources, it's not enough resources for what these children need. And we really need to step up as a community, not only to foster, but also to get involved and provide the support for the families that do step up, because every little thing, does help. And I want to thank you for inviting me. I hope that some of you will be inspired to look into the process and make the effort. Every year we have to get relicensed, whether we have children or not. And it's been a couple of years since we've fostered. We actually provide respite care now more because of other obligations. It's the process itself is a little bit intrusive, and then to keep up with the classes, the CMEs, the continuing education, and the relicensing. It's an effort. But then, crisis like sharing crisis, Afghan crisis is when everybody wants to step in and do something, but we need people to actually follow through. There's so many children in the system. These are an invisible group of children that we have an obligation that we will be held accountable to as a community. Did we do enough? Did we provide the family that they needed? Because I will tell you that children absorb in the environment that they're in. And if my foster son or my foster children absorbed what was in our home, then imagine what they would absorb being in a home of another faith, how they would, would they be able to maintain their faith identity? And that's a responsibility that we would bear as a community. So I thank you again for the opportunity to speak. And I ask you to really consider filling this great need. Every year, more and more of our children are entering the foster care system. And so the need grows with every year. And I hope that some of you can take the responsibility and take up and accept the responsibility. And we are here as an organization, you're here as foster parents to support you. And thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Semina. Next, we have Sister Nicole Gazi, who is currently serving as the Executive Director of Muslim Family Services of Ohio. She has held this position since 2013, where she is able to utilize her management skills and expertise to serve women, families, and individuals in our community. Welcome, Nicole.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible because I'm sure I have the least to actually offer to this particular conversation today. But I do want to talk a little bit about how my agency interfaces with children's services, with families that are facing foster care or removal of a child from a home, and sort of what our role is in that, and sort of what I see. I can also speak very briefly to, and I'm asked this a lot, the issue of unaccompanied minors and how that plays into all of this. But by and large, most of our work, most of our effort obviously is going to land squarely on those families who are in our community right now who need us most, right? That what is our obligation to our neighbor? What is our obligation, to our fellow community members? So for those of you who are somewhat familiar with the agency I work for, one of our primary services truly is case management. And we are really an agency that for well over 25, 26 years now has really looked at how do we empower and support families within our community. So in situations where there's some sort of instability, and that can be anything, whether it's economic and financial, health, mental health, social, cultural, immigration instabilities, all of that stuff, all of these instabilities can result in, unfortunately, or can have the potential to result in some sort of interaction with Children's Protective Services. Now, there are families that will call on us when they basically are notified they're going to be involved. They're going to have an investigation open. there are times when a case manager will call us to find out how we can support a family through that business and through that interview process. So I can tell you that our goal typically is going to be on that stabilization, right? And to do that, we generally tend to look at, go at this in sort of two different prongs, I call it. What I would say is that we would go ahead and look at family support, and we look at advocacy. And they're very close, to be honest with you. But on the flip side, just to kind of go into a little bit more detail, family support is where Children's Services opens a case. We can see maybe where the problem arose from. We can see how we can be part of a solution. To give you a really brief example, I had a woman call us a number of years ago. She's no longer in our community, so I don't think anybody listening would be able to identify her. But the school reported that the children were coming to school dirty and they wanted to file a Children's Services investigation or open one up. I felt that was a little bit inflammatory and unfair, but digging in, this woman had 9 children. And for this particular family, they lived, for those of you who are familiar with Columbus, they lived over in North Linden. They lived really struggling day to day just to get enough food on the table. Her washing machine was broken. And so that's kind of a no-brainer, right? But now that Children's Services is open, they're looking at everything that's going on in the home. So in that particular case, our family support, we immediately got her a washer. We were able to step up our embracing of that family with some regular food support, securing employment, better employment for the parents, just trying to lend that stability to that home. And then over the course of time, of course, Children's Services closed the case and nothing else needed to be done. We also sometimes have to work in advocacy, where there's situations where sometimes we feel that, somebody does not have the skills to advocate for themselves. Maybe they have, had a little bit of unfairness kind of meted out in terms of what they're being accused of. And so we will actually, at their behest, we will sit in on those interviews. We will definitely work with referrals that Children's Services wants made. We will definitely help secure different types of stabilization supports as needed. Our goal is always going to be to prevent the removal of children from the home. Now, to be clear, if there is a legitimate reason to remove a child from the home, if there is an issue with domestic violence of any kind, it is not our goal to turn a blind eye to that and to smooth that over. Again, there are supports and there are certainly resources and referrals to help a family come out of that type of trauma. But as appropriate, we will help them meet those requirements. But we definitely would never turn a blind eye when there is a domestic violence situation. Now, basically, in the community anecdotally, I can say that we do have families that are in the foster care system. Like I said, most of our touch points with families are hoping to prevent a removal of a child from the home, but they are there. We do have some. I wouldn't say that we have an unusually large percentage of children, any greater than any other group per se, but it is something of concern and something that should be on our radar as a community. Some of the challenges that we face, parenting issues within our community, parenting issues can definitely be compounded by cultural divides, right? Generational divides between a child and a parent. And we're seeing a lot of breakdown right now, especially as children sort of approach those preteen and adolescent years. Sometimes there's a lot going on in households and in families that make it very difficult for families to deal with. There are economic stresses, absolutely. Family that is not feeling secure in their economic ability to provide, so may have difficulty meeting the basic safety needs of a child, right? Shelter, food, clothing. And that can feed into a system where there's a breakdown in the family. And of course, there's some cultural and language barriers that sometimes exist, where, as I talked about advocacy, our families are not able to self-advocate for themselves, and just need an ally in the room that can help sort out all the missing pieces and moving parts that may be going on. There's definitely what I call trauma and drama when a child needs to be removed from a home, and it's not an easy conversation that we have with families when they are in the midst of that, right? And so I can tell you that the goal, and the next speaker is actually going to give us a lot of, so I want to wrap up really fast here, but the next speaker is going to give us the information on what it is to be a foster parent in Ohio, in Franklin County, in our community, because every community differs and we need to be familiar with the rules, laws, and practices that are local to us. But I can tell you that offering up your home and offering up your family to be a foster family is a big decision, right? And not one to be taken lightly, fair enough. Foster care almost always has a goal of reunification with a biological family member. And your willingness to essentially be a model parent, right? To model parenting for somebody who maybe isn't as good at it, right? To bring to the table some integrity and dignity and respect, that can make a huge difference for a struggling family, that you've provided sort of a safe space for their child while they're trying to get their act together. And at the same time, there is, this concept that you are in part sort of modeling to both the child and to the biological family better practices, in parenting. It's a very transformational role, absolutely. Respite care is something else that I hope Jessie will speak about, because I am seeing that kind of come to the fray with some of the cases we're dealing with right now that involve teenagers. And respite care is more of, it's a different need. It is more of an emergency placement when maybe there's already an intervention plan in place with Children's Services. The child may not be actually removed from the home, but there is some sort of intervention going on. I think these are usually very temporary assignments. You're providing sort of that safe timeout space for a family that just needs basically what it sounds like, respite from each other. And the very essence, of being there at a critical time really is an effort to help a family through a very troubled experience. I will say that anybody who comes to us regarding foster care is offered our support as an agency, simply because we kind of get to see the whole picture of how families struggle in our community. Foster care parents can count on us if they need an emergency supply of clothing in the gender and size of the child they're fostering. They can come to us if they need a car seat, a crib, a high chair, whatever it is, because we typically get a hold of these things for our families, and we are willing to do so in the case of foster care as well. These things can be costly to purchase. We have done formula when maybe a birth parent doesn't hand the WIC vouchers over to a fostering family. We will provide formula. All these things can be very costly for a family to purchase. So we definitely try to provide those types of supports where we can. I did, again, look up some stats on sort of this question always comes to me whenever there is an overseas crisis about unaccompanied minors. But I do, and I usually do caution our community and talk a little bit about the fact that we actually don't have an agency through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, through the US government, that resettles unaccompanied minors here in Ohio. I think the closest locations are in Michigan. So we are not an area that typically receives unaccompanied minors, nor would I expect that to change, at least in my work with our two official resettlers here, Us Together and Chris. That's not something, sometimes that we do get unaccompanied minors, they're usually older. and about to age out, and they may come in. Historically, most of those have been from South America, or Central and South America, and the like, just to give you an idea. But by and large, what I would say is that this is, if it takes an overseas crisis for us to have this conversation from time to time, so be it. That's what it is. And I think all of us want to do what we can, whether it is for a local family, whether it is for somebody that, potentially is coming from overseas. I think we would all admit that whatever effort we put in solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that we would undertake as a big responsibility. And I would applaud people who definitely want to look into that. So while there's many options of foster care providers in our area, I'm going to definitely let Jessie speak to the specifics. She's going to be our expert. And I just want to remind everybody that when you're looking at helping a family that's just struggling through raising a child, raising a teen, any kind of relief, any kind of support, any kind of hope that you have the ability to provide to that child and that family in need is truly profound. And you may not see the rewards right away, but trust me, they are there. And I certainly hope that you will take advantage of having Jessie here to find out some information on how we can all kind of step up a little bit if we have the capacity to do so. Thank you.
Jazakallah here, Nicole. Next, we do have Miss Jessie Schmoyer. Jessie is a licensed social worker and supervisor in the foster care department at the Buckeye Ranch. She specializes in helping foster families become licensed and complete their home studies. She states that while the licensing process can be lengthy and tedious, the licensing team at the Buckeye Ranch will walk you through every step of the way. She encourages all families who are interested to inquire at buckeyeranch.org for more information. Jessie.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be here on behalf of the Buckeye Ranch. As mentioned, my specialty is on the licensing end of things. So all of the steps that have to happen prior to you being eligible to take children into your home. So I'm going to speak very logistically to some of those things. I'll go ahead and share my slides here. Okay. Just one moment. Okay. Becoming a foster parent. We're going to be talking about rules, policies, procedures, and the home study process. When you hear the word becoming licensed or completing your home study, those are both interchangeable with one another. So keep that in mind as I kind of use some of that jargon. A home study is an in-depth assessment, which is meant to determine a person or family's suitability and readiness to become a foster or adoptive parent. The home study process is governed by the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, and they are the legal entities who write all of the laws and regulations around what it takes to become licensed. So there should be a link on the Facebook page to access the Ohio Revised Code. I have it listed up here with the web address, although it's really difficult to navigate. There's a lot of information in there about what it takes for an agency to be able to license foster adoptive parents. And then there's other sections that relate specifically to your rights and responsibilities as a foster parent. So I'm going to speak to those. And if anyone wants to look at the Ohio Revised Code website and has an interest in learning more or asking specific questions, I am always open to having those one-on-one conversations. But like I said, I'll go ahead and give that high-level overview now. So as I said, policymakers at ODJFS create and enforce the standards, requirements, and procedures, aka foster care rule. These standards include laws related to foster parent eligibility, how a home study must be conducted, as well as foster parent and foster child rights and responsibilities. all licensing agencies and licensed foster parents are subject to following the standards of the Ohio Revised Code. So I put that in here to say that you are not going to come to the Buckeye Ranch and be expected to do anything that you wouldn't be expected to do at another licensing agency or at a county licensing agency. We may have some internal policies that are slightly more strict than what Ohio mandates in order to become a foster parent, but they're very minor things. So primarily choosing your licensing agency, the agency that you're going to work with once you are taking children into your home, is really just a matter of preference. So you are welcome to, shop around and look for agencies that best fit your needs. However, I will say that the Buckeye Ranch, it has a very long-standing history in the community in Central Ohio. And we retain foster parents very well. So I know people are really happy with us. And again, I would encourage you to inquire on the buckeyeranch.org under Become a Foster Parent for more information. So getting a little bit into the nitty gritty of eligibility and general requirements. In Ohio, in order to become a foster parent, you must be at least 18. You must be an Ohio resident and a permanent resident of the United States. Legally married couples, I apologize for the typo, may be a legally married couple, single person, or co-parents. You can have up to 3 people on a license. So if you're a household that has 3 adults present, you can all become licensed foster parents together. If you are an unmarried couple and you both do not wish to be on the license, only one person has to be, or you can both choose to be. However, if you are a legally married couple in the same household, both foster parents, both people have to become foster parents, and we'll go through what that process looks like. So it's something to keep in mind, that this is really a dual partnership and co-parenting effort. Another rule that it states under eligibility is must have functional literacy, be able to read and write at the level necessary to participate effectively within the community in which you live, as well as communicate with the service team and children placed in your home. Okay, so something that we are going to assess pretty thoroughly during the home study process is your finances. I just want to reiterate something that was mentioned earlier, which is that this is a very invasive, intrusive process to become licensed as a foster parent. I do believe it's more invasive in Ohio than in other states. There's other states that have more lax standards. Ohio is pretty intensive all the way around. So I'll start with the financial aspect. And the reason that we are looking so heavily into finances when assessing your home and completing the home study is because we want to assure that our families are quote unquote in it for the right reasons. So they're not interested in this as a means to supporting their own household or using per diem money that comes from caring for children, to meet their own needs. So we have to make sure that whether or not you have children placed in your home and you're being incentivized for that you can meet the needs of your own household regardless. So there's no, salary requirement or anything like that. You just have to essentially prove that you are able to maintain your own household without any additional subsidies or incomes that may or may not come from being a foster parent. So there's a financial statement that you'll have to complete. It's just a 2-page form. It comes directly from the state, and we can walk you through that. You do have to show proof of income for your household from the most recent tax year prior to your application. So tax return, proof of income for the household for a 2-month period. So for the most recent 2 months typically is what we ask for. Pay stubs, bank statements, however that may look, depending on how your income comes to you, just to prove that you have steady, sufficient income regularly coming in. We do need to see at least 1 utility bill for each utility necessary to maintain the household, including a phone bill, and to see that those are up to date, or if they're not, that you're on, a payment plan that you're able to meet, and then proof of your ability to pay mortgage, rent. So those are some of the financial requirements. As far as medical, the Ohio Revised Code rule states shall be free of any physical, emotional, or mental condition which could endanger a child or seriously impair the ability of a foster caregiver to care for a foster child. There's a medical statement, again, a form that comes directly from Job and Family Services that you will fill out, and you will also take to your physician, and the physician essentially just signs off and states that they don't have any concerns about your well-being or your ability to care for children. If you see a therapist or a medical professional who has a different specialty outside of your primary care physician, we do reserve the right to ask for additional references or medical statements from those providers. Immunization records, you are able to decline these. However, we do ask for immunization records or flu vaccine and DTaP, and then all childhood immunizations for children in the household. And then something to keep in mind is that those becoming licensed are not the only ones who are subject to this. Your household members as well will need to be interviewed and have some of these forms completed. So if you have an adult household member or child household member, they will also need to complete the medical statement for us. They actually don't have to take it to their physician. There's just a front side that they would fill out, kind of declaring some of their, that they're sound to be able to be a part of the foster family and the household. As far as criminal history, you will also be subject to background checks, which include BCI, FBI, a local county check, an internal alleged perpetrator check that we complete on our end, a national sex offender check, and BMV check. And something that I really like to make abundantly clear is that having a criminal history, having a past, having an offense on your record does not necessarily disqualify you from becoming a foster parent. There are prohibited charges that essentially foster care rule, Ohio Revised Code dictates that if you have any of these specific charges, there is no rehabilitation for that. You simply are never going to be eligible to be a foster parent. However, many of the more serious charges that you may see on a background check have what are called rehabilitative standards, which means that all we need to do is discuss the situation with you, talk about what happened, what you learned, was there a victim of the crime, how did your sentence end. So there's some different rehabilitative standards that we can go through with you, but it will need to be discussed in detail in the home study. So that is something to keep in mind. You may be required to obtain documentation, court records, those kinds of things, proving that, either time has been served or probation has been completed, so on and so forth. I always want to encourage people who have criminal records to still apply or talk to their licensing specialists about their charges. Something that we've found with our families who do have something in their history, some kind of past, is that it does help them empathize even more with our children who are in need or who are maybe going through the juvenile justice system. So it really can be turned around as a strength. We will let you know if it is something that will prohibit you from becoming a foster parent, but please don't hesitate to apply because of that. I do want to reiterate, however, as I put in my slide, putting false information or omitting criminal history information on the application will automatically disqualify you. So if you're skeptical that you don't want to put something down because you are not sure if it would show up or not on your background check, and then it does show up, that could be an automatic disqualifier. So we just ask for total honesty. We will work with you on everything. So the home study starts with an application. When you log on to our website at thebuckeyeranch.org and go to become a foster parent and scroll down to the bottom, it'll say home study application, but that is actually not really accurate. That is not your application. That is just your inquiry form, signing up and saying, hey, I'm interested in learning more. So please keep that in mind, because once you do that, you will be sent an application. It is a Job and Family Services ODJFS form, and it has to be filled out in its entirety. So please keep that in mind. You'll fill out the inquiry application on the website, and then you'll receive a packet of information, and then a licensing specialist will get with you when you're ready to fill out the actual home study application. You have to have certain information such as 10 years worth of residential history, 10 years worth of employment history, for references, and some other different information that will be requested of you. The very first thing you're going to want to do before even starting your application is, after you inquire, you will get information about what's called pre-service training. It's 36 hours of training, 40 if you include CPR first aid. Buckeye Ranch provides all of the training. They're done in the evenings or on Saturdays. Right now, please take advantage because they are all being done online on a go-to training platform. It makes things really easy. You don't have to get childcare or make plans to leave work early. You just hop on your computer and you sit in on these classes. So I do encourage everyone to take advantage of that right now due to some of the pandemic precautions. So you can work on your pre-service training classes while simultaneously working on your home study. All we ask is that you start class, so maybe you take one class before you turn in your application. That way you can take class, say, yes, this is really something I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and turn in my application. So you can be doing these things dually, which can kind of speed the process up. So you complete your application, you start your pre-service training, and then you're going to really dive into the home study a little bit more, which we'll start with what's called an autobiography form. So there's an intensive interview process. You'll be assigned your home study assessor, or AKA your licensing specialist, and you'll probably have 1 to 3 in-person interviews, just depending on how in depth you get during that time with your home study assessor. You'll also fill out a relatively lengthy autobiography form that's just going to ask you about all different aspects of your life, your upbringing, your parenting skills, your motivation to foster or adopt, etc. We're going to be asking for a lot of different documentation, such as driver's license, social security card, as we previously talked about, all the different finances, car insurance, the medical pieces, references, pet vaccines, etc. When your interviews are completed and you have turned in most of your documentation, when we're getting more toward the end of the process, we'll complete a safety audit in your home. And you'll also call your local fire department for a fire inspection. You also need to have an alternative care provider approved. So that's simply someone in your natural support system who could be available to support you in the case of emergencies when you have foster children in your care. I want to talk briefly about occupancy limitations. So this means that once you are licensed as a foster parent, it's if, for example, you already have children in your home or you're kind of low on bedrooms in your house, that kind of thing. These are some things to be mindful of. No more than 4 children to a bedroom. That can be bio children, adoptive children, foster children. It doesn't matter. You can put them in bedrooms together as long as there's no more than 4. You cannot mix genders except when children are under the age of 5 or if it's a teenage parent residing with their child. No foster children can reside with anyone over the age of 18 in a bedroom. So if you have a teenage son and a teenage foster son and your teenage son turns 18 and the other child is still 17, you do have to figure out alternative arrangements. You cannot have more than 2 children under 2 or 4 children under the age of 5 in your home at any time, except for accommodations such as accommodating a sibling group. No more than 3 children at a time in your first 2 years of fostering, except for, again, to accommodate siblings. You may not have more than 10 children total in your home at any one time, and there are no accommodations to that, and that includes if you're a type B daycare home or you provide childcare. And then once you have fostered for 2 years or more, 5 foster children at a time is the max, except of course to accommodate siblings, previous placements, or kinship children. Something to please keep in mind is that you decide the age, gender, how many children you're willing to accept. All of those acceptance criteria, aspects, behaviors, diagnoses, that is all within your control and your preferences. If we ever do call you and say, hey, we have this child who's really in need of a home, he's experiencing, XYZ, this is his age range, you are never required to say, yes, we'll take that child if it's something that doesn't seem to fit within your family dynamic or your capabilities at that time. So you are always welcome to say no to a placement, and that is okay. And we encourage people to do that because we would rather you say no up front rather than say, yes, I'll give it a try, and then disrupt that child later. Because anytime a child is disrupted and removed from one home and moved into another, it is further traumatizing. So that is within your, within your decision-making rights. As discussed earlier, respite is always needed. Respite essentially means that if we have a foster parent within the Buckeye Ranch network who needs a break, who is having an emergency, who just needs some help, we can call you and say, hey, can this person's, foster child come stay with you for a few nights? There's also what's called direct care respite, which means that families in the community who need help can also call our agency and say, do you have a licensed foster parent who can help take this, this family's biological child for a few nights? Please keep in mind that respite families do need to go through the same home study process as foster families. So that is not different in regard to kind of the steps you have to go through to become licensed. However, the need is just as huge. I know I'm throwing a lot of information, so please, again, keep in mind, I'm happy to talk to anyone individually after this. Some other important notes are that children are placed based on what's called level of care. If you are a treatment home, that means that you're able to take these higher level of care children. And in order to be a treatment home, you have to qualify at initial licensure. The easiest, most common way to qualify is basically if you have raised a child full-time for a period of 5 years or more. So that means that you have a child who's age 5 or older, or you've had a child living with you for that length of time. There's other ways that you can become a treatment home, such as having a certain amount of training hours. We usually encourage people, if they're not eligible to become treatment right away, to get licensed as a family level home, which means that you'll only take traditional level of care children, and then you can take training through the Buckeye Ranch to reach that treatment level criteria, and then be able to take some of those higher level of need kiddos. Financial and staff support. Once you do become licensed, if you refer new families to us and they get licensed, there is bonuses for you as a foster family for that. There's daily stipend for foster children who are placed in your home, depending on their level of care. If they are a Franklin County placement, there is also an extra per diem rate if they are ages 11 plus, because that is the highest need right now. So that is being incentivized. There's a quarterly clothing allowance for each child in your home, and that's through the Buckeye Ranch. Mileage reimbursement, and you will have a Buckeye Ranch case manager assigned to your home. They will not move with the child, they will stay with you. So as new children come in and out of your care, you will have the same case manager there to support you. So that is something that is really helpful and a service through the Buckeye Ranch. Your licensing specialist is here to help. So I know as I'm speaking, I'm realizing how overwhelming this sounds, and the home study process, it is overwhelming, and it can be tedious, and it can be draining, and it can feel very invasive. However, I want anyone listening to know that you can take as much or as little time as you need. We will work with you. We will walk you through it step by step. We have very manageable tasks that we give out one at a time. So we'll say right now, all you need to do is complete this autobiography. So when you're done with that, let's get together. I'll come to your home. We'll talk a little bit about some of these, documents that we need to get together. So it can take anywhere from 3 to 8 months, give or take, and it's really depending on your pace, your motivation, your abilities to, kind of get organized, or just your desire to move at whatever pace you please. So I want to let everyone know that while it sounds overwhelming, and it can be, it's less overwhelming when you think about it in a span of, an average of 6 months. Taking that time together, you'll get to know your licensing specialist very well, and they'll feel like part of your family. And so I hope that that is encouraging. So I'm happy to take any questions about the very specific aspects of the licensing process. I'm also happy to connect with anyone after the call. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessie. That was very informative. I would like to thank all of our presenters for the wonderful presentations. We have just under 30 minutes to address some of the questions that have come in. Most I will just put out there, and if it applies to you, feel free to answer. There are some that will be presenter specific. But the first one is, are there websites available with streamlined guidelines for the paperwork requirements to foster?
So I can speak to that. I apologize. I'm trying to get out of my screen here. There are, job and family services websites. I would not call them very family friendly or easy to navigate. There's sites that you can go to and you can download all of the different JFS forms that are required. However, you won't really know what you're looking for, what forms you need. So really your number one best bet is going to be to inquire with the agency of your choosing. Of course, I would suggest the Buckeye Ranch, and we will give you step-by-step guidelines. We can give you, a plethora of information, checklists, those kinds of things. So really working one-on-one with a licensing specialist to get that information is really the only resource that I know of. I can't think of anywhere where you could go online and just have access to everything you need to become a foster parent without connecting directly with an assessor.
Perfect, thank you. The next one is actually for Dr. Sameena specifically. And how would you address a full-time working mom's feelings of not being able to meet the emotional and physical needs of a foster child?
So I think I did talk about how this is not something that you can do on your own. You do need to create a support system. If you're married, you have to make sure that your spouse is on board. If you have children, make sure, obviously, and that's part of the licensing process, to do check with the children to make sure, but it really is all hands on deck. And I had family close by, I had friends that I had identified, and it's not easy, but I think nobody should have to do it by themselves. I think at some point you need to have people. It's a challenging job. And I was fortunate in that although I'm working, I was working part-time. So I was working 3 to 4 days a week. And you do have to have some flexibility. Either you or your spouse has to have some flexibility in your schedule, because you have children that literally show up at your doorstep. You have to enroll them in school. You have to get their paperwork. You have to go to school meetings with their counselors. So and you take them to their health appointments. And so I think it is important to be prepared for that. And during the licensing process, they do ask you all those things to see if you're ready. And I think a couple of the presenters had touched on the idea of respite. It's a great way to see what it's like to be a foster parent without committing to long-term. Becoming licensed takes a long process, but then you can, when just as Jessie mentioned, if somebody calls and you think that this is something that they'll give you an idea as to how long maybe the placement might be, if it's a respite or emergency. And it's a good way to get an idea as to what you can handle and what you can't. And respite is very much needed as foster parenting, because I actually used respite care several times with my placements. And it's just a weekend, sometimes one time is a week, sometimes it's just a day, but it really gives you the breather that you need to handle situations at home or your own personal things. And so I think that's a good place to start. But I think where there's a will, there's a way. And if you have people on board with you, I wouldn't try to do it on my own, but if you have people on board with you and you're willing to delegate and work with other people, it's doable. It's doable. And as a professional, you have the training, you've been able to juggle multiple things. You know, this is you know, you have situations at work that you're probably managing. And so I would still consider it, but I think I would go in with preparation and creating that support system. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you. The next question is, what, if any, would the risks be of identifying minors as Muslims in foster care?
So we have the same situation in Michigan. It's not an identifier. And what we were told was that so there wouldn't be any discrimination against the children. We have been, as an organization and as foster parents, been trying to lobby that it should be an identifier so that children are placed in homes. Because currently, unless the agency or the caseworker is sensitive to and has the cultural sensitivity to understand that these children need to be in homes that are very similar to theirs, sometimes it's just a matter of just getting them placed. But I think as they are realizing that Muslim children or children of other faiths have specific needs that cannot always be met by any foster parent, they are realizing the importance of it. And the agencies that we've been working with, even though they don't have the identifier in their larger system, the agencies themselves have been trying to identify them. And then they reach out to us and let us know that there's a child that comes in the system, be able to provide them with a welcome package, be able to give them contact information. So if the parent would like to reach out to us. So I think the understanding that it is, but I think it's a legal issue more than anything. Jessie, maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. However, I can say that in Ohio, we do ask the children their religious preferences when they're being brought into custody. In case there is something very specific, we can try to accommodate, or the county can accommodate, you know, if possible.
Great, thank you. This one is for Sister Maryum. Do you see denial in the Muslim community in research, in your research of having unaccompanied minors in the foster care system?
Wait, can you repeat that, please? I'm sorry. Denial.
I'm assuming it's, do you see denial in the Muslim community that there's the need for this with having unaccompanied minors in the foster care system?
So I think that there's definitely a lot of denial. I think that we can, it was a shock, and it wasn't, to be working with so many Muslim families when I was doing this work, and there has never not been a family so there's never been a time where I haven't worked with Muslims, and we are doing ourselves a disservice by not being there, right? We're doing ourselves a disservice by not going into, I've done social work for 20 years. I've mentored so many people. I've talked to people about first jobs, getting out, and things like that. And I tell everybody, go to CPS, do that, get that exposure. You're going to learn so much about everything, and you can take that experience into everything, every aspect of your life, right? And so, and people are like, oh, it's so much work, oh, the system is this and that and whatnot, and we're doing our own community a disservice, right? Because we are disengaging, right? We are kind of vilifying them, right? Which ends up happening in other cultures and communities as well, but because we're not creating these relationships, we end up, you know, when there are these cases where there are kids in trouble, those kids are then left alone, right? And so, yeah, there is a lot of denial about this stuff. There is a lot of, we're not speaking enough about healthy parenting techniques. We're not, addressing educating kids on healthy discipline and things like that, and appropriate ways of parenting children and whatnot. And so yeah, there is that. And then the other place that I think that we don't really think about, right? But there are times where there's a young child who loses both of their parents, right? There could be this horrible, tragic accident, right? And unless there is something written, there's a plan for that child written in a will. And Jessie, you can confirm this about me, but to my knowledge, right, the state gets involved, right, in assessing and determining where this child goes. Right. So it can be abuse. It can be so many different factors that bring these children into the system. So we need to be more involved in this. And remember, it's just, there's a lot of conversation about the difficulty of the process. There's a lot of conversation about the challenges of fostering. But Islamically, these are the kinds of things this is service to God, service to Allah, right? And Allah says that, like, the person who cares for the orphans is like this, like Prophet peace be upon him is like this on the day of judgment with him, right? And the reason why the reward is so great is because the work and the sacrifice is so intense. And so we need to have our intention straight and kind of commit to us doing this for the sake of Allah.
Thank you. And the next one is if somebody can just briefly discuss the difference between foster care and adoption.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that briefly. And of course, if anyone wants to add on, I just want to speak specifically to the Buckeye Ranch. We are what's called a foster to adopt agency. We do not have waiting children who are in need of immediate adoption. Every once in a while, you'll have a referral come in for a child, usually a teenager who's already in permanent custody and is in need of permanency as soon as possible. And they'll potentially look for an adoptive home, but 99.9% of the time, children are coming into care under temporary custody, and the goal is always to reunify them with their biological families, with their kin, whether that be blood or just their natural supports. So you'll learn a lot about that in pre-service, about the benefits of reunification and the research behind that, and just kind of being a temporary safe haven for children as a foster parent. However, in the circumstance, and this does happen, and if you become a foster parent and stick with it long enough, you will eventually have a child in your care where permanency is not possible, reunification is not possible. Either they don't have kin available or their bio families aren't meeting safety standards, and so that child will need a permanent home. And you, as that foster parent, may be a very viable match because you've already created community and a bond with that child. So you could be looked at, if you're interested, to match with that child for adoption. So that's how foster to adopt works. If you are looking to adopt a waiting child who is already in need, or be matched with a birth parent who's putting their child up for adoption, those are called private adoption agencies, and that is not something that we as a foster to adopt agency specialize in.
Great, thank you. Again, for Dr. Zahor, did you find Muslim families less likely to sign up for foster care due to the paperwork or lack of interest in providing care?
No, I think the biggest challenge that we had with people not signing up was, I think, the misunderstanding of, or the perceived barrier of the whole Maryum issue. So as fostering a child of the opposite sex, it's going to be too difficult. How am I going to manage? I have girls. How can I foster boys? I have boys. How can I foster girls? I was fortunate in that I had 3 boys. So for me, it was easier fostering a boy. But I had teenage boys. Actually, I had 16-year-old boys at one point. They were in my home, and I wore hijab when I was with them. And it's something that, I think it's a mindset issue that if you make it a big deal, it can be a big deal. But it's similar to if your children's friends came over. I mean, how would you be? I mean, how many of your friends' children, if they were in a difficult situation, you'd have them in your home. And so I think the perception of that it's haram or that there's a Maryum barrier, I think that's the biggest barrier that we saw with people. And then when they started the process of licensing, they ask all sorts of questions about, questions that can be intrusive about, are there any mental health issues in your family? Any family members who are incarcerated? They'll come into your home and they'll look at everything. Do you have, a walkout basement? Do you have some way, I forget what's the term that when you have the window in your basement? Do you have, where would you place a child? Do you have carbon monoxide? And I mean, I think, again, it's a mindset issue. What would you want people, what kind of vetting would you like people to have your children in their home? Okay, if I wanted my child, right, if there's something that happened to me, I would want to make sure that they are in a home that's been fully vetted. It's safe. Are there any possible predators? And so if you look at it from that angle, it's not, it's actually a very noble process in that that the state goes to so many lengths to make sure that the children are placed in safe homes. But we're so used to having convenience and things are easy and I'm jumping through hoops for a child that we may or may not like, and we have these are perceived barriers. And I think talking to somebody that's gone through the process is helpful. They have foster navigators. There are foster parents who have gone through the system, talking to them. I mean, in retrospect, and when you get the children in your home and when you see, you realize that it's not overly burdensome, but when you're going through it, it can seem a lot.
Thank you. The next two questions I'm going to kind of combine together. There was a question about if you are a homeschool family, would the foster child be required to go to public school or would you be able to homeschool them, as well as traveling out of state or out of the county if you do have a placement?
Yeah, so as far as traveling, it used to be that you could not do so much as get your child your foster child a haircut without permission. There's a new standard in Ohio called the Reasonable and Prudent Parenting Standard, and that essentially means that as far as extracurriculars, developmentally appropriate, activities, getting your driver's license, a 16-year-old driving with their buddy who has their driver's license in a car, those kinds of things that used to be prohibited. You now, as the foster parent, have the authority to make some of those reasonable, age-appropriate decisions for your foster child. However, when it comes to traveling, you're always just going to want to check it out with the caseworker first, make sure it's not interfering with any bio-parent visits or case visits or court, anything related to court that needs to happen at that time. But yeah, traveling, it just needs to be planful. But it's certainly, we love when our foster parents take kids with them because it's such an amazing experience that they may not have even had before, to travel, different parts of the country. So I apologize for the noise. As far as homeschooling, I think it depends on your credentials as a homeschool teacher to determine whether or not you have proper credentialing to be able to homeschool children who are in the county's custody. But I know that we do have foster parents who homeschool both their bio and their foster children. So it is possible. I can't speak to the specific dynamics of that, though, unfortunately, off the top of my head, but something I'm happy to look more into for anyone who is specifically interested in homeschooling foster children.
Great, thank you. And also someone says there's a lot of information about people fostering for the benefits. How do you censor the process, and how much of the stories we hear about abuse of the foster system and children is true?
I definitely can't say how much or how little of these stories are true. I know that what we hear in the news is, you know, essentially because the news outlets sometimes just focus on the negative. So there's a foster parent abusing their foster child, that's going to be shown everywhere. It's just not enough money for people to really do it for the money, in my opinion. And it's just, it wouldn't be worth it. So, we do have pretty intensive investigative standards, again, through ODJFS. If there is abuse happening in the home, it will be thoroughly investigated both through the county and your licensing agency. However, I know that the vast majority of foster parents I've worked with and who come to us through the Buckeye Ranch are, for lack of better words, in it for the right reasons. I mean, you don't commit your life to something like this unless you love children, you love service, you want to give back to your community, you want to be fulfilled. I mean, and those are all things that we assess really thoroughly, again, during the home study process. Your motivation, your intent to foster, we are really looking for that. So I would say that the stereotypes out there that people just do it for the money is probably just that, a stereotype that I wouldn't say is really founded on, you know, truth in the sense of like the majority of foster parents and what their motives are. So
I will just say that in my work with the Muslim Foster Care Association and speaking to foster children or former foster children, there are a lot of things that inadvertently happen when Muslim children are in homes of other faith. That's not intentional. They may not be aware of the dietary guidelines, halal food. They may not be aware of the holidays, you know, the criteria for prayer, wudu. And so even though I can say that for minority children and Muslim children specifically, you know, we've heard stories of children feeling uncomfortable fasting, or, you know, not being able to get up for Sahur because, you know, not wanting to wake up their family members and foster family members. So I think it's more challenging for Muslim children. You know, we have heard firsthand stories of children being fed, you know, products from, you know, with pork and ham and things like that unknowingly. And so that's why I think there's such a need for the Muslim community to get involved, you know, whether as a supportive family, whether as a, you know, court appointed advocate, whether as, you know, to really advocate for these children, because these children are in situations where they are very, I mean, the power dynamics is so uneven, obviously, right? These foster children are very vulnerable. And so we need to be the advocates, and we need to be involved, not just as a foster family, but as much as we can. And it can be challenging sometimes because these are invisible. We don't know which families are fostering. We don't know which children are foster children, but that's why it's important to get involved with organizations and agencies that do connect with the children to see what we can do. You know, they need mentors, they need tutors. There's so many things that people can do. But again, not so much speaking to the, you know, intentional abuse, but sometimes Muslim children are more prone to being in challenging situations because their families of other faiths are not aware of their specific needs.
Thank you. And I'll combine these questions too, mostly for Jessie. First is, can a family be licensed with more than one agency? And does the application kind of overlap, like the home studies, the fire inspection and things like that? And then also, if there is a couple who's going through immigration and one of the partners is not here, are they able to start the process while going through immigration, awaiting the other spouse?
So that would really be just a case-by-case basis, just kind of concerning the parent who is here, whether they're on a, their residency is conditional or not. They could certainly start the process and knock out, let's say, some of those training hours themselves, and then wait for their partner to come to start their training. However, it's really something that kind of is more conducive to do together as a couple. But you could start getting your house ready for the fire inspection, the safety inspection. You could start collecting some of the documents that are required. There's certainly things you could do to, I guess I would say, speed the process up while you're waiting on your partner. So that's something that we could definitely work with you on, again, as a case-by-case basis. I apologize, can you repeat the first question?
Can someone be licensed in multiple agencies, and would things like the fire inspection and the things that are not agency specific transfer from agency to agency?
You may only be licensed with one agency. That's part of Ohio Revised Code, and you are also welcome to transfer agencies if you're unhappy. Let's say you come to the Buckeye Ranch and you're unhappy with services or supports, and you'd like to transfer. If you've been licensed for under a year, both the agency receiving and the agency transferring out, the family have to agree. If you've been licensed for over a year, you may transfer, at your own choice, whenever you'd like. You can have dual adoption licenses. So if you wanted to have an adoption license open with the Buckeye Ranch for the foster to adopt piece, and then let's say an adoption license open at a private adoption agency to be matched with a birth parent, that's permissible. But as far as foster care, you're only eligible to work with one agency at a time.
Perfect, thank you.
I did want to speak to, sorry.
Go ahead.
I did want to speak to the difference between domestic foster care and refugee foster care, in that domestic foster care really is the child is in your home for a temporary basis and with the goal to reunify with their family. Refugee foster care, you're licensed with the understanding that these are children that have come from overseas, unaccompanied. Unaccompanied minors is the other name for refugee foster care children. Their parents don't have family here. They're unable to find their parents. They've been in refugee camps for years. And so the expectation is that they will stay with you until, I mean, they're usually teenagers from the ages of 13 and above, and they'll usually stay with you until they are able to be independent living. So if you're looking for more of a stable, long-term placement, refugee foster care definitely, but has its own challenges. Some of these children are very limited with the English. They're years behind in their education, and they have, assimilating to a new culture is a big challenge. And then domestic foster care, again, is usually more short-term. Most of them, it's through reunification. All of the 4 children that I fostered, one of them did end up needing a permanent adoption. But I think the majority of them, they do go back, and you really don't know. There's no sort of guideline when that child comes into your home, how long they'll be with you. And as Jessie said, I think it's a very important point to reiterate. You have a choice as to what type of child you would like in your home. And if somebody calls you to have placement and you don't think it's a good time, it's better to say no. I've said no several times in several occasions when there's been personal things going on, because it is a commitment, and you don't want that child to be disrupted, more than they already have. And so at any time you can say, I'm on hold right now. I can only do respite care, or I can't do anything right now. And if somebody calls you, sometimes they'll call you on something you didn't even ask for. I mean, I have 3 boys. I made it very, very specific that I would only have boys in my home in a certain age group. And they called me on girls, they called me on teenagers. And they'll call you because it's a desperate situation, but you always have the right to say, this is not a good fit for me.
Great, thank you very much. We are just about out of time. I want to thank each of you for the information that you shared, and would remind those of you watching to please include the masjid and all these organizations in your prayers, in your charity donations as well. We would like to invite people to join the parent support group, as well as sign up for our newsletter here at the masjid. And with that, I hope you guys all have a good day, inshallah, and salamu alaikum.